Welcome to Headlines. This is David Lichtenstein here in the Yeshiva Shalmala with an hour of Halacha and Hashkafa. We mix it up. This week we'll be speaking about Halacha, Kevurah in Eretz Yisroel, burial in Eretz Yisroel. How important is it? Most people live on limited budgets. So do you catch up on your tuition for Rabbeim, or do you pay for somebody you loved? Burial in Eretz Yisroel. What is it? Is it a mitzvah? Is it a deraisa? Is it a drabanan? Is it an inyan? It's become the fashion, and not a lot has been written about it because, let's face it, till the last, 50 years of air travel, it was exceedingly uncommon to be able to get a nifta to Eretz Yisroel. It was a miraculous thing. They say the Rambam, some say they put his body on a chamoyer and it ran for 40 days until it went where it was. But it was, how did you bring a mace to Eretz Yisroel? So there has not been a big body of halacha on it. It's fairly current. Everybody does it, and most everybody is ignorant. They don't know what it is. So we are going to have Rabbi Doniel Neustadt. He's the Rav of Pine River Village in Lakewood. He was formerly the Yoshev Rosh of the Vaad Harabbonim of Detroit. He's one of an anical of Rabbi Yankiv, one of the truly erudite Rabbanim of our generation here in America. He will be speaking about it. We will have Rabbi Avrohom Cohen. He's the Rav of Ohaiv Yisrael in Monsey. He's the former editor for many years of the Journal of Halacha and Contemporary Society. And then we will have Rabbi Elchonon Zohn, the president of the National Association of Chevra Kadisha. He'll be speaking about the cost. You know that the cost in Eretz Yisrael of burial in Eretz Yisrael is 400%, you heard that correct, of what a burial in America is. So do you use the money to support a child, or do you bury somebody? Is it a good thing? Or if you had endless amount of money, should you do it? Well, you'll hear the surprising opinion of Rabbi Yankiv Kamenetsky. No matter how much you have, you should not be doing this, both hashkafically and halachically with the Zohn. Fascinating opinions. I think many of you will find it educating. We should never have to do it. We should be zeichesun to be as goyal, but if we ever have to, this is a must listen. Next week, we will be going back maybe a little bit hashkafa. We're sort of debating it. We will do a little bit on Rubashkin, some Rabbanim who discuss all these celebrations, victory laps. Are they appropriate or not? Before we begin, I would like to say something about the Parsha. This Parsha is really very interesting. I'd like to juxtapose the beginning of Bereshis to Shemais. Bereshis starts off with Chava. She's a pretty weak woman. #Me Too. She's talked into the Nachash, to doing the worst things. The Gemara says maybe, Ba Nachash al Chava v'hitel ba Zuama. Maybe it was some type of immorality. Maybe it was she just was weak and didn't know who she was. Parsha Shemai starts off with 6 mighty women. The whole Parsha, the whole Geula starts off with the strength of the Jewish woman and the non-Jewish women, but the strength, womanhood in all its takifas and all its mila. Geula starts with the strong woman. And who are they? Well, for starters, they're all the Nashim Tzidkanias, who had Shisha Bekeres Echad. The Gemara says that they used their Maras Hatzaives, they used their mirrors, and they looked into their mirrors and they beautified themselves, and through that the Geula came. Nashim Tzidkanias, they used mirrors, and those mirrors ultimately became the Kier. And then let's go back to the other women who you all know of. Yoshev. Who's Yoshev? Her husband said, have more children, bring more children into a terrible world. It was a terrible world then. And what did she say? She said, you're worse than Pari. Pari was just geyser on the scharim. He wants to eradicate the males. You want to eradicate the females too. So she said, you can't do that. Yoshev had belief and confidence in the future. That's the first one. Her husband, seemingly, the way Chazal put it, was somewhat worried, was weak, was scared. Yoshev was not scared. She had to put her foot down. She was a mighty woman, Yoshev. Miriam, the older sister. This is the big sister watching out for her brothers. Maybe her brothers who are younger, maybe brothers who aren't as wise. Nashim grow up faster. They have Bina Yisera, the wise older sister. Who's the next one? Shifra and Pua. They feared Hashem. They spewed Hashem. They feared Him. And here we have women who, because of Yiras Shamayim, will not create staunch boundaries. Another group of mighty women. What do you have? Basya. Vatishlach esamasa. What does Chazal say? What do all the Baalei Mussar say? Her arm grew 100 feet long. And what do they say? Where there's a will, there's a way. Here's a woman who said, I will save that child. I will fix that situation. I don't seem empowered. I'm unempowered. I'm the hashtag #Me2. I don't accept that. I am empowered. I can do whatever I set my mind to do. Married men, some of us may have heard that. Right? Vatishlach esamasa, another mighty woman. Sipira. Moshe loses his cool. He doesn't know what to do. He's just all shook up. She jumps up and she does what she has to do. Another mighty woman. What do they all have in common? The women of the Maris at Tzayvos, Yoshev, Miriam, Chevra, Pua, Basya, Tzipar, what do they all have in common? Here's what I think. It says the Nashim had the Maris at Tzayvos. They looked into the mirror. You know, most people look at viewing a mirror as something negative. It's a type of narcissism. But you could see it differently too. They looked into the mirror and they knew who they were. They knew their strengths. They knew they knew what they could accomplish. The men didn't. In every one of these situations, the men were scared. And the women looked in and they said, I know who I am. I know what I can accomplish. I know what Tishvach HaSamatza. I know you fear for the future having children. We can have children. The Geula starts with the woman who was intimidated, Chava. Geula starts with these fabulous women, these heroines, who said, they looked in the mirror and they said, I know my strength. And I am in many ways stronger than my husband, stronger than the men. When women take their Nashim Sitkanias, you have Chava and Bereshis. Here you have Geula. Geula starts off with 6 women. Klal Yisrael was always recognized from the very beginning. All the names Moshe has, he has 10 names, the Gemara in Site says. All the names he has, which one does he keep? He keeps the name of the one his mother, his stepmother, Basya, gave to him. So, to all of us who are married, who have sisters, who have daughters, who have mothers, this week is a particular parsha to respect them and to respect this Bina Yisera that Nashim have. They look in the mirror and they say, I know who I am. Let's respect our wives, mothers, daughters this Shabbos. Let's go to our fabulous guest, Kevurah in Eretz Yisroel. It will surprise you, some of our answers. We have the honor of having with us on the phone Rabbi Doniel Neustadt, who's the Rav of Pine River Village in Lakewood. He's the Einikel of Rabbi Yankiv. He's the editor and publisher of the Emes Yankiv. He was previously Rav of Detroit. Welcome, Rabbi Neustadt.
Hello. Good evening.
So, Rabbi Neustadt, many people, when I say many, I don't know the number. It could be as many as 50% of people who today are nifter in America send their parents, whatever the case may be, over to Eretz Yisroel for Kevurah. And I understand it's quite expensive. I know that when my in-laws, were buried in Eretz Yisroel, it was between the Mekaymis on Har Menuches and the Chevra Kadisha, etc. It was probably $75,000 plus, including airfare and it was just a lot of money. There are many people who $75,000 could be a lot of money to. That means per person it could be $35,000. The plot itself could be $25,000, $30,000, $35,000 plus airfare plus Chevra Kadisha, double, etc. And people, I'm chayvivei mitzvahs. Klal Yisrael do anything for a mitzvah. Look what parents go through, backbreaking effort to keep their children in Klal Yisrael. That's what we are about, is kiyum mitzvahs. So my question is, given you're standing a Rav of eminent Rav in an entire city and one of our Harabbonim, give us a feeling, how much effort should somebody make when an elderly parent dies and they leave over some money, or they don't, to send a parent or somebody else to Kevurah in Eretz Yisroel?
Well, to compare this Inyan of being buried in Eretz Yisroel to some of the other mitzvahs that you mentioned, like paying tuition, for Talmud Torah, it's really not an analogy. Paying tuition is a requirement. It's something that you have to do. It's mitzvah asay deraisa. When it comes to having somebody buried in Eretz Yisroel, it's no mitzvah. One does not perform or fulfill any mitzvah by doing that. At most, it's an inyan. It's not a waste of time. It's not a waste of money, but it's not an obligation, and one does not get any mitzvah for being buried in Eretz Yisroel. As a matter of fact, it's quite controversial, and there's some who hold that it should not even be done. So if a person wants to do it and he has the money to do it, or if the deceased left specific instructions that he wants to go there, so then, I guess it's a mitzvah l'kaim divrei meis if you could afford it. But there's no mitzvah per se. There's no obligation, and quite possibly it may not even be a good thing according to some opinions.
So Rav Neustadt, let me ask you. We just finished Vayechi, Shmais, right, this week in Vayechi, and what did he say? Simna yadcha tachas yirechi, right? Don't bury me in Eretz Yisroel, right? Take me to Mitzrayim. Take me to Eretz Yisroel. Kvartani b'kfurasam. Yaakov Avinu was mishtaikik to be buried in Eretz Yisroel. It was his last request, and seemingly because of this, he said, "It's not too sure because of this, but it seems to imply because of this tircha." Some Rishonim say, why would Yaakov go through such effort for something that is not a mitzvah?
It's an Indian. There's no question that he had. First of all, Rashi brings down in the name of the Medrash that he had specific reasons. He was worried about the Kinim. He was worried about his Makam Kevurah to become a place of Avodah Zarah. He had specific reasons that he wanted to, specifically in his case, he wanted to go to Eretz Yisroel. And most importantly, the real reason why he wanted to go to Eretz Yisroel to be buried is because he was worried about the future generations. They're going to become assimilated to Mitzrayim. They're not going to know that they really belong in Eretz Yisroel. So he felt that the best way that you could connect yourself to the land is if your forefathers are buried over there, so the future generations in Mitzrayim will know we don't belong here. We belong elsewhere. Our great Zaydi is buried in Eretz Yisroel. So he had a lot of specific reasons why that needed to be done. On the contrary, we see that he had to go out of his way to ask Yoshev to do it, but Yoshev wouldn't have done it otherwise. This is a specific case under certain circumstances which were important. But it's not a mitzvah for anybody else. It might be an Indian, but it's not a mitzvah.
And how do you understand the Gemara in Ksubis? I think it's Kuvav or Kufir Aleph, that the Gemara says, Amar Avchanan, he says, whoever's buried in Eretz Yisrael, Kilu Nikbar Tachas HaMezbeach, Ksiv V'chiper Admasai Amai. I mean, that sounds pretty serious.
It sounds like it's a good thing to do. It sounds like it's an Indian, but again, it doesn't say anything about a mitzvah. A person does not get a mitzvah. It doesn't get specific schar for doing it. There's a big difference between a mitzvah and an Indian. So that's first of all. Secondly, the Gemara also brings out another opinion over there, that the Gemara brings out two opinions, and the other opinion of the Gemara is that it's not the same. People should be living in Eretz Yisroel. Eretz Yisroel is for the living, not just after one dies. So the Gemara is actually saying that it's not such a good thing. At least it's not such a Indian. The person who wants to be buried in Eretz Yisroel, great, but move there when you're alive. But to bring the body after death, you don't see from that Gemara that it's important. At least not according to all opinions. I mean, the Zohar is very clear that it's a negative thing. The Zohar says "Vatavoyu vatetamu es artzi," that it goes on a person that brings his dead body to be buried in Eretz Yisroel. We call that "Vatetamu es artzi." You defiled the land. So again, there are opinions on both sides of the issue, and there are sources for both sides. And those that go to Eretz Yisroel have certainly who to rely upon, but you can't make a mitzvah out of it, and you can't make it into a chiyuv or something that is, if you have no money, like it would be forbidden, in my opinion, to raise money for that. It's not a tzedakah. It would not be considered a tzedakah.
And what was your grandfather, Rabbi Yankiv, I know is buried? I've been to his cave many times off the interstate in Brooklyn. What was his opinion about being buried in Eretz Yisrael?
He was not pro. Yeah, he was not pro. He was not pro. Neither was Rabbi Moshe. Neither was Rav Henkin.
And why? Why did your grandfather? What are the reasons that he stated?
Well, actually, in his case, what he said was the most important place to be buried is so that the kids should be able to come and visit by the yard sites and other occasions. And for him to go be buried in Eretz Yisroel, where his kids are living in America, he felt is completely not menschlich. And that's the reason that he said to the family. There may have been other reasons I did not hear from him, so I can't say, but that was the reason that he said to the family. He wants that the kids should have access to his kever.
It's a question of a chibur with avos. It's a connection to the avar. It's a connection to the shirish, he felt.
Well, he felt that the kids should have a place to go when they need, right?
The famous story, could you maybe recount us the famous story? I'm sure many of our listeners have heard it, but I'd like to hear it closer to the source, about the time Rabbi Yankiv was on a plane and one of his einikoch was being mishamish him. You know what I'm referring to, right?
Sure.
Could you say it over? Yeah. Let's hear it more directly from the Shirish. Such an incredible story.
Yeah. He was being, it was actually not his einikoch, it was actually my father-in-law who was being mishamish him. They were going in 1980 to the Knesset Gedola in Eretz Yisroel in Yerushalayim. And it was actually my father-in-law who was mishamish him hand over foot, which is what
that's the Rashiva of Shmuel.
No, that's Rabbi Avrohom Kamenetsky. He's no longer alive.
Rabbi Avrohom Kamenetsky.
That's the youngest son. Yeah. That's the youngest son.
Okay.
That's the youngest.
Yeah.
So it was sitting next to him. It was sitting the Yerucham Meshel. Yerucham Meshel was the head of the Histadrut at that time, the Israeli labor union. And he just, after a while, he says he couldn't contain himself any longer. He says, he asked Rabbi Yaakov, how do you get such covet and such derech eretz from the younger generation? By us, the older generation means you're over the hill. You don't count for anything. It's all about youth. And here, I see the exact opposite. What did you instill in them? Like, how did this happen? So he says you just couldn't get over such a dedication. So Yaakov told him that the famous line that it depends where you're coming from. If you're coming from Har Sinai, so then the closer you are to Har Sinai, if you believe in Matan Torah Har Sinai, so the closer we are to Har Sinai, the holier and the more important we are, because we're still connected. We still have a vestige, a little remaining connection. Every generation removed from Har Sinai is a generation lower. You read the Sadars. Whereas if you come from monkeys, so then as you are going away from your monkey source, you're higher. So therefore, the youth is more important than older people because they're more developed, more modern, and more ahead of the game. So it all depends on that. That's what he explained to him.
So the chibur to the avos, Rabbi Yankiv felt, was very important, and that's why he felt that's why he believed in being buried in the. What was Ramay?
I'm not sure what you mean by chibur. The access, to have access, to be able to go there. There's a tzara in the family. There's a chayli. There's a yard side. You want to go daven by the kever. He held that that's the most important thing.
And what did Ramay hold?
Ramay also was against it. He himself ended up there for certain reasons, I don't know. But people who counseled him, I know people who asked him, he did not counsel to go.
And I'm curious, why did he end up there, which was such a loss to America? One of the One of the biggest losses America had is that we can't go be mispal by Ramay all the time.
I agree. It was not his doing, I can tell you that much. There were certain things in the parts of the family that wanted it. I don't have this from first source, so I don't know. But the Satmar Rav, of course, is on record being very against it. He writes about it in Divrei Yoel many times. And there's an interesting tshuva from Rav Henkin. Rav Henkin says that he doesn't forbid it, but he strongly advises against it. And he says that... Yeah, what?
Go ahead, Rabbi.
Yeah, he says...
Rabbi Neustadt, I'll tell you that my number one complaint, and I get a lot of calls, is they say, Mr. Lichtenstein, why are you always interrupting your guests? So I apologize. Finish up.
No problem. So Henkin writes that he quotes a Chavis al-Zavis, that a bonus is not given unless the debt is paid, which means that you don't do the bonus before the ikr. This is a tuffle. This is extra special. This is the dessert. But there's more important things than that. And therefore, if a person has limited funds, and you should absolutely not spend it on that, but you should give it to things that you have to do more. He writes very strongly that if somebody does it against the widow and the orphans, they just do it because they think it's important. He says, I consider that stealing from the widow and the orphans, that you're taking money to this thing, because again, he didn't hold it to be important. And he didn't say it's usher, but he certainly did not advise it for most people. Only for tzaddikim.
So
he writes. Yeah.
So where did it come from? Where did this? It's sort of like a new fashion, a nayim mother.
Right.
It never used to be, and it became like it never happened before. I mean, go to Eretz Yisroel. You walk into there's nobody before the last 50 years. There was nobody brought from Chutzlars. Practically, it was a tiny number. The Rambam, the Nes. Right. But where did this come from?
Well, in most of our history, it wasn't really an option, because before planes, you really couldn't take the body there by ship, by boat. It wasn't really Negea. So it's only Negea since after the war.
Well, the Rajba talks about already, Chuvas Rajba, about putting sid on a mace, so that the buster is this akal, and you bring the bones to Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah.
It could have been done, but in a different fashion.
No, that's not so practical. But today it became easy and somewhat cheap, for people that have money, and it sounds like a very good thing. And there is good things about it. Again, there is an aspect of kapara that the Gemara talks about. And the Rambam also hedges about it. If you take a look in the Rambam, he says that the G'dolei HaChachamim used to go to it, which means that I understand the Rambam to mean that it's only for the G'dolei HaChachamim, that everything else is perfect in their lives, and this is the little bit more that they're missing, this little kapara, so then it's something. But if a person is a Russia, it's going to help you to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. You think that Herzl gets a kapara because he's buried in the Har Herzl? I don't think so.
And what about a Beinani?
No, the Rambam says G'dolei HaChachamim. Rav Henkin writes, the great Talmidei Chachamim who are world-renowned for their meticulous observance of mitzvahs, both the easy ones and the harder ones. It is fitting and proper to bring them to burial in Eretz Yisrael, as were Yaakov and Yosef. That's what he writes. And that's he doesn't write his source, but I assume it's the Rambam.
Right.
Because the Rambam says G'dolei HaChachamim. So,
Rabbi Neustadt, thank you for giving us over the Messiah that you heard from Yehilig Gezeda, that you Makabel from Rav Moshe, that you heard from Rav Henkin. Thank you for sharing it. I think that many people who can't afford this will be relieved by hearing the strength with which you put forth this position.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good.
We have on the phone with us from Monsey, New York, Rabbi Avrohom Cohen. He's the Rav of Congregation Ohaiv Yisrael in Monsey. He's the former editor for many years of the Journal and Contemporary Halacha. Welcome, Rabbi Cohen.
My pleasure.
I forgot to mention a Talmud of Chaim Berlin, a Talmud of Agoyin Rabbi Tzakutna, who I also consider my Rebbe. Certainly, I don't know if he considered me a Talmud, but I considered him a Rebbe. Welcome, Rabbi Cohen. So, Rabbi Cohen, you wrote an article a few years ago about burial in Eretz Yisrael, and being that this parsha talks about, Yaakov Avinu's shuka, shtoikas, to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, we thought it would be a very current topic. Could you give us a little bit of a synopsis of what your conclusions were?
The journal which had it was the fall of Sukkot of 5,759, the fall of 1998, and it's on page 22. And actually, there are various opinions. It's not as simple cut as one sounds. It all begins with the Yerushalmi. It's the end of Perek Tes Halacha Daled in the Yerushalmi of Klayim. Gemara discusses how Rabbi Bar Kriri and Rebbe Elazar were walking, and they saw a person who had lived in Chutzlars coming to Eretz Yisrael, And they basically had a difference of opinion. One opinion was about the Tova, about the Tama Arzi, who needs it, they're coming to be Matam of the land. The other one held the V'chiper ad Moshe Oleho. Okay, there actually are two opinions. You find the Gemara in Ksubis. The Gemara in Ksubis on Daf Kuf Yud Aleph also talks about how everybody involved in Tchiyas HaMesim will have to be in Eretz Yisroel, and there is something which is called Gilgal, and there are different opinions now as to exactly what happens. Opinion number one is that it's a great idea to be buried in Eretz Yisroel. That was probably articulated best by the Chelkas Yaakov. The Chelkas Yaakov is in Chela Gimel, it's Kuf Mem Beis, where the Chelkas Yaakov was of the opinion that everybody agrees that it's wonderful to be buried in Eretz Yisroel. Biggest raya seems to be from the fact that normally we do not have Pinui Atzomas. Pinui Atzomas is when someone is buried, that's where they remain, except for very, very few exceptions. One of the exceptions is to go to Eretz Yisroel. Well, if one of the exceptions is to go to Eretz Yisroel, evidently you see that it's very important to be buried in Eretz Yisroel. Further proof is the Rambam. The Rambam is in Hilchos Malachim. It's Perek Hey Halacha Yud Aleph. And the Rambam writes, even though it's far better to live in Eretz Yisroel and to die in Eretz Yisroel than to be buried in Eretz Yisroel, v'afal pi kein gdolei hachachomim hoyim malichin es miseim l'sham, tzei lamad mi Yaakov Avinu v'Yosef HaTzadik. What you refer to in this week's Parsha, you have Yaakov and Yosef HaTzadik all wanting to be buried in Eretz Yisroel. On the other extreme is the opinion of Rav Henkin. On the other extreme is the opinion of Rav Henkin, where Rav Henkin in the Kisvei, Rav Henkin is Chelik Beis, it's Taf Tzadik Aleph. Rav Henkin is of the opinion that it is really totally contrary to everything that we stand for. Chazal instituted that everybody should be buried with tachrichim in a simple pine box. They wanted to keep down the expenses. The Gemara says it became so expensive to bury people that people were leaving the mesim in the street. So Rabbi Gamliel made a takona, everybody gets buried the same way. We want to keep the price down. And what has happened now is you have an enormous expense in taking somebody to Eretz Yisroel, which means we are now expending and going contrary to the takona of Rabbi Gamliel. Even though Rabbi Gamliel was of the opinion to keep expenses down, we've now enhanced the expenses. So Rav Henkin was definitely one of those who was against. So far to say that there are such opinions against, that a discussion ensued in regards to moving Moses Montefiore to Eretz Yisroel. Rav Moshe has a tshuva where he is adamantly against it. His tshuva is in Yeridea Chela Gimel, it's Kufnu and Gimel, adamantly against it. He says, you see that it's a mitzvah, you can make Pinui Atzomas to bring someone to Eretz Yisroel. He says, well, that is only on the children and not on anybody else, and it's a bezoyan, and they should not be done. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, on the other hand, was of the opinion that it's a great idea to have Moses Montefiore be brought to Eretz Yisroel. He loved Eretz Yisroel. He wanted to be in Eretz Yisroel. If I might add my own opinion, I would tend to imagine that it really also depends on who we're talking about. There are some people who, by their fiber and their nature, their entire being is they love Eretz Yisroel. They have a tremendous chukka to go to Eretz Yisroel. They want to be in Eretz Yisroel. Whenever they get an opportunity, they go to Eretz Yisroel. That's one kind of a person. And then, for whatever reason, they can't go. Ezra did not go to Eretz Yisroel as soon as he could. He waited as long as his Rebbe, Reb Baruch and Uriah was alive. He waited to go to Eretz Yisroel. But his libi, his heart was in Eretz Yisroel. That kind of a person I could understand. But what we have now today, which is everybody feeling the pressure of having to make everybody go to Eretz Yisroel, I think we've added an enormous expense. I think our money spending money where they shouldn't. And if it were up to me, it wouldn't be going on. But I'm not the Paisik Adar, so I can't really tell you what to do.
So, Rabbi Cohen, let me go back over. You downloaded a lot of information there, so let's go back over some of it. For starters, the Shulchan Aruch does not bring anywhere the concept of a mitzvah to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. That's correct, no?
The Shulchan Aruch brings that you can be mefana a mace. In other words,
it allows it. I'm saying it allows.
Right.
It gives the heter of killing I believe. I think you could should follow Gimel, but it certainly does not bring that there's any mitzvah to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, right?
You don't find it. You do find it in the Rambam, though. Rambam, I quoted. The Rambam does say that there is such a mitzvah.
Yeah, he doesn't say it's a mitzvah. He says that and there's a chuvas Rambam as well. He says that. So here's a question. The Yerushalmi that you quoted, which is also a tanchuma in a number of places, right? It's a tanchum in Parsha Shmos, same little bit of a shina and stuff. Says that, he says, and it says that, why are you bringing your Mesim to Eretz Yisrael? So it seems to imply that if somebody could have lived here and they didn't, it's one thing. But somebody who had the opportunity, that's the shita, and it's a Zohar Kaddish that I believe the Rabbi Yoel from Satmar, the Satmar Rebbe, which is why he didn't want to. That's very strong. The Zohar Kaddish says, your entire life you had the opportunity to live at Eretz Yisrael. The same Gemara in Ksubis that you quoted also says, the same Gemara in Ksubis that you quoted, it says, Kol hadar b'chutz la'aretz k'bi daima l'misha ein le'elika. Somebody who lives in chutz la'aretz is if he's rejecting the Rabbi Shalom, right? And on the other hand, Shakal Yeshiva Eretz Yisrael K'kala Mitzvah Shebetayra. So here, the Zohar Kaddish says, during your life, when you had the ability to buy an El Al ticket, what did you do? You lived in the Chutz La'aretz. And you were daima l'misha ein le'elika. Now your body, you want to bring to Israel, to Eretz Yisrael, he says, you're making from Kodesh Chayil, and you're making from Chayil Kodesh. I mean, to paraphrase Bilam, I remember Chaim Shmulevitz used to say, he said, Thomas Dafshi Mois Yisharim, the Hiachrisi Kabaya. Reb Chaim used to say, Lebed at the Gewalt vi Bilam, he wanted to live like Bilam, but Starben at the Gewalt vi the Avis. He wanted to die like the Avis. So the Zohar Kaddish says, your whole life you could live in Eretz Yisrael. You didn't want to. You bring the bodies to Eretz Yisrael, and because of that, the Satmar Rebbe didn't do it, and Rav Sternbach, in his Chuvas Van Hug, says the same thing. He says, based that we have a Zohar Kaddish that talks in such a derogatory way about people coming up to Eretz Yisrael just for burial, he says, why would you want to go through this expense to be nichnas into something that the Zohar Kaddish speaks with such admonition and such a kitrug about? I think that the point
definitely. Go ahead.
It's today. My point is today there's a new evolution in this where people really have the ability to come to Eretz Yisrael, which somewhat changes the playing field. In the time of, let's say, the Shulchan Aruch, it was very, very difficult to get to Eretz Yisrael. So somebody saying, I want to send the body to Eretz Yisrael was not necessarily being over on the Zohar Kaddish. Like the Achronim already say that Yaakov Avinu wanted to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. He had to leave Eretz Yisrael to Einer. He said, when people could be Mekayim mitzvahs Yishuv Eretz Yisrael and be Doima Sheyesh Lam Elika and don't, Zohar Kaddish says, why are you bringing bodies to Eretz Yisrael? I think that at a certain level, the playing field has changed in the year 2017. That is my hasafa that I'm adding on to what you say.
I must tell you, if you take a look, Rav Gusman, who I definitely was also a Talmud of his, and at the end of his Sefer in Kedushin, he has that there are two ways that a minik starts in Klal Yisrael. One way the minik starts in Klal Yisrael, we'll talk from the top down. The Rabbonim think it's a good idea, and in order for it to become a minig, it has to have the acceptability of the people, because anything that the people can't do, Chazal can't make it takana. Then he writes that there are minhagim that start from the bottom up. The people think it's a great idea. Numerous examples of Tyrus HaMishpacha were instituted by the people, and then Chazal thought it's a good idea, so they went along with it. My opinion, my personal opinion, is this minig has started from the people. And for whatever reason, in the Hasidic community, you don't have this at all. They definitely follow the Zohar. The Satmar Rebbe was not in Eretz Yisrael. The Lubavitcher Rebbe is not in Eretz Yisrael. The Kloisenberger Rebbe, who I don't really know which which Beis Olam he's in. But I mean, here's a man who's Chukot Eretz Yisroel. He started Kiryat Tzans. He started the Ladina Hospital. Hasidic community basically indefinitely follows this Zohar that you mentioned. On the other hand, our community has somehow, the people have started doing this. And for whatever reason, the Rosh Hashivas and the Rabbonim are hesitant to just stand up and say, don't do it. Now, I don't know why, but that seems to be what's happened. You're articulating a position which is the people are doing what the people want to do, and nobody is telling them to stop it.
Now, the Kloisenberger Rebbe writes in Divrei Yatzin, I'll post it to you on the site. He says, interesting, he says it's not loy move a loy b'shulchan aruch a loy b'Rambam. I don't know why the Rambam doesn't he doesn't bring, but that's his lashon. Mitzvah kazu. And he says, Afal Pisha Meviim Yesh Lachers for Fire HaKadosh, the Afal Pisha Mutter Vaad Lav Mitzvah. That's the lashon of the. Now I have a different question, and this is an interesting thing. The Biur Halacha discusses, as well as the Shulchan Aruch talks about, and Avrohom talks about, they used to raise the price of fish, the goyim, when it came near Yom Tif. So even as a din of Basa v'Dagim v'Chol Matamim, right? The Magen Avrohom in Reish Bay says that if the miyakid is dagim, he says don't eat fish on Shabbos. Mm-hmm. And he brings a makar from the Mishnah and Krisis. I forgot who he brings it from. He brings it from one of the Kadmonim. He says that Reb Gamliel made that an Isha had to bring a carbon for Yeledes, a kiddim, and it used to be, they raised the price of it. He said, no, stop, bring one for 5 Yeledes. So he brings up a card where we don't want to be we don't want the mafia to hold us up and extract great prices. That's how he says Lagabi being the Yakar Dagim, even though it's part of tiny Einik Shabbos, and the Makari brings the carbon lettuce, which is the Raisa. So even for the Raisa, they did not want us to be held at gunpoint. The Mishnah Berurah and Biur Halacha brings in Tafresh Vav, he says that the whole din of Hidr Mitzvah Shlish or the mitzvah ad chaimesh is only if that is a fair price. Again, not if somebody is a mafioso. So I have a letter from a guy, and he says, you can buy a Kevurah in Yerushalayim today in Harabbonim, and it goes for $500 or $600 a square foot, which is basically more than a completed deer in Yerushalayim doesn't go for on a square foot basis what the Chevra Kadisha in Yerushalayim extract from people who are on Harabbonim. So he says they all drive Mercedes-Benz, all of this non-profit, quote unquote. He says it's a gangster thing. So my question would be, even if you held it was a mitzvah, which it doesn't seem anybody really says the Farish, it's that Yom Rambam brings it up. He says it's a mitzvah, Inyan Gadol, it's a Chachamim Gedalim Umshtaki. But even if it was a genuine mitzvah, we have Mekayris at Halacha that for a mitzvah, you don't allow somebody to pull out a gun and say, I'm charging you some exorbitant price. So my question would be, why hasn't anybody stood up and say, why is this different than the fish with it? If you buy in the
because here
it's one-tenth the price of Yerushalayim. It's a bunch of
no, because here you don't have the merchants. Here you don't have the merchants in any way putting pressure on anybody to do anything. It is the people. I'm telling you, I think Rav Gusman's Havana is marvelous. It is the people who have decided it's a wonderful thing, and now today everybody has to keep up with the Joneses to do it.
So Rabbi Cohen, if somebody came to you, Rabbi Cohen,
somebody came to me and asked me, my husband passed away. I am now an almana, and I have X amount of money. It's a matter of sending my husband and burying him in Eretz Yisroel as opposed to paying schar limud. I would say definitely bury him here in America and pay schar limud. You have to pay your bills. What's happening here
and there's a continue. I'm sorry.
What's happening here is that the people are just doing it. Every third person that you hear that passes away, the levaya is taking place at this and this time, and the body is being taken to Eretz Yisroel. It's not as if
Rabbi Cohen, would you point
not as if the fishermen are raising the price of fish. It's not as if the airlines are raising the price of the tickets. It's the people on their own are doing it. So it's hard, it's hard to compare it to the mafia.
No, but my point is that they know that Americans will pay this price, right? So they've, in effect, raised the price so beyond what a piece of vacant land should sell for, because they say, hey, we have everybody over the barrel. You know, you want to get in here, you're going to pay through your nose.
Okay.
I think even if it was a mitzvah, it would be arguable whether it would be a chiyuv. And then, I mean, the question like you is, there's a letter from Rabbi Aaron Kotler I saw, where he actually was asked by somebody in Kletsk whether they should bring the body to Eretz Yisroel at great expense, or in effect they could use the money for other good things, like you said, maybe schar limud, maybe a kid who's in yeshiva, maybe paying for education. And Rabbi Aaron Kotler said, absolutely use the money for tzedakah. And
I think anybody who ever learned through the sugya would agree.
Yeah, and there's a tshuva now I saw from Yoshev. We'll put this on the side. Who was asked the same question. Yoshev said, "Mitzvah say in the Torah, the mitzvah of being buried in Eretz Yisrael is not brought in the Torah. Therefore, follow the mitzvahs that say in the Torah, not the ones that don't say in the Torah." Very interesting. It goes so negative. You know, I think a lot of people, we have a way of taking a tuffle and turning it into an ikar. It happens. You see it all the time, right?
Well, again, for some reason, where you find this happening quite often, the Rosh Hashivas and the Rabbonim are hesitant to tell people not to do it. Now, I'm not clear why, but for some reason they're hesitant to tell them why. You have the same problem with the price of chasanas. It's the exact same situation. People who borrow money to make a chasana for their sons or their daughters at an enormous expense, and why? You know, why
so you would equate the two.
I would assume they're both exactly the same. You know, it's a very, very nice thing to make a chasana for one's child, but to go out and to borrow money and to be a balchov and not to be able to pay schar limud and not be able to do anything, why would that be? You can find a number of years ago, I think it was the Aguda Rabbonim who tried to stop the expenses of a chasana. It just never caught on, but.
Well, thank you very much, Rabbi.
This is definitely going to take a very, very strong stand. This is not going to just stop, you know, because it may be true that it should stop. This is going to take a strong stand. Again, the Hasidic community is totally not involved in this. It's all
Rabbi Yankiv Kamenetsky, who was, I believe, a neighbor of yours in Monsey, he had a very strong opinion about it for another reason. I think his opinion was, he says, one of the greatest hisoiris that children get is from visiting the kevurah of a parent. He says if the parent's kevurah is local, so the children are hisoir many times during the year. A kid has a tzara, a kid has a kala, an exam, a kala has to, before a chasana or a kala. You have somebody's having, they're depressed. They'll go to Kivriyavis to be mispal. If the kevurah is 6,000 miles away, he says, all that hisoiris is missing. It's sort of a little bit of a nituk between the parents and the children. That was Rabbi Yankiv's opinion. We will have Rabbi Yankiv's grandson talking about that today.
Good.
Well, Rabbi Cohen, thank you very much for joining us.
Be well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So we have on the phone with us from New York, Rabbi Elchonon Zohn, who's the National Director of the Chevra Kadisha, and he's also Director of the Chevra Kadisha of Queens. Welcome, Rabbi Zohn.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me. What can I do to help?
Rabbi Zohn, how much does it cost for a typical burial place here in the United States to do a levaya and buy a plot, put up a headstone here in the United States?
That's a very broad-ranging question. Well, the answer is a very broad range. A levaya right now across the country at a Jewish funeral home, which is a simple funeral, meaning they're using a plain pine box. There is no viewing. There are no limousines. There are obviously no flowers or anything of that nature, is probably about $8,000. That is the cost of the funeral itself, and that's probably an average. There are certainly funerals that are much more expensive if they use more expensive caskets, but a simple traditional funeral is about $8,000, I would say, on average across the country. Again, if you're talking about the same exact thing in certain parts of New York, it probably could be a few $1,000s less than that. And as reasonable as $2,000 to $3,000 if it's not going to be using a hearse, it's going to be a graveside service, and it's going to be a very, very simple funeral. But again, that is only available.
And what about the plot, Rabbi Zohn? If this, it's in New Jersey, etc. Yep.
The plots really depend on whether someone is a member of a society or a shul, where the plots could be very reasonable, and some memberships actually will provide a plot free. But if you go into a cemetery to purchase a grave, in the New York area now, the lowest you can get it for is about $2,000 to $2,500, and that is just in a couple of places. Most of the places charge about $6,000 to $8,000 for a plot. In New Jersey,
the same
is a little bit cheaper.
The same levaya, taking the person to Harabbonim, would cost, how much would the funeral be, and how much would the plot be?
Again, there's a very wide range for the funeral, depending on whether there's going to be a levaya.
The same one.
Exact thing. The same exact
thing.
thing. Okay.
Now you have to
talking
transfer
about
the body.
You're talking about a levaya here. The levaya here might be the same $8,000. Might not be any different. Okay, because you're still going to be having everything done here. The chapel is going to be used, but instead of bringing them to the cemetery, you're bringing them to the airport. Okay, so that kind of levaya would be probably identical. The cost of the grave, as far as I know, Harabbonim may not even have graves now unless they're a double depth or above ground. They have some new things they're using for
the Har Tamir. Let's say Har Tamir.
Har Tamir, if that's, again, as far as I know, the cheapest grave right now in Harabbonim is about $25,000 and up.
And how much would the plane and doing the levaya, sort of a small levaya in Eretz Yisroel?
Okay, the plane is, I believe, the airfare alone is about over $2,000, about $2,000 and a little bit. There are also, obviously, funeral director costs that deal with getting all the paperwork done through the consulate, going to the airport, making sure that everything's taken care of. I would guess somewhere between $500 and $1,000 for that. And then in Eretz Yisroel, you're talking about a couple of $1,000 that the Chevra Kadisha there is going to require. Depending on where, depending on which Chevra Kadisha, there are differences. But in that range, probably about $2,000 to $2,500 for the Chevra Kadisha in Eretz Yisroel, plus the airfare, which is about $2,000 plus somewhere between $500 and $1,000 for the paperwork at this end that has to be done. So,
and additionally, somebody usually goes along, right?
Well, there's a family that has to go, or if someone goes along, that again raises the cost dramatically, because usually you're talking about a last-minute ticket, which if the flights are full, could be in the thousands of dollars, because they've got to bump other people to get it done, certainly if more than one person is going. But yeah, that is an additional cost as well if someone is going to accompany the body.
So one would be $40,000 when you add it all up, and one is $8,000. Is that correct?
Well, if you're talking about Harabbonim, Eretz Chaim, for example, in Eretz Yisroel, which is not in Yerushalayim, which is right outside of Beit Shemesh, it is much less. You can get a grave in Eretz Chaim. In fact, I believe all the graves in Eretz Chaim cost $8,000 right now. Those prices, I believe, will be going up in the near future, but right now that's what it is.
So, Rabbi Zohn, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Rabbi Zohn, here's the question. Why is a plot in the New York area, you said around, could be $2,000, and in Harabbonim and Har Tamir, it's $25,000? Why is it more than 10 times the price?
Well, it's very simple. It's like everything else in capitalism, it's supply and demand. There is a very, very short supply of graves in Eretz Yisroel. As you see, that they're burying two people in the same grave, and they're building graves above ground because there just is no space, specifically in Harabbonim, which is in Yerushalayim and is not Har HaZeisim. Har HaZeisim has a problem that there's a security issue. So people who want to be buried in Harabbonim, either because their family is buried there, And Har Menuchos, if you realize, for about 20 years, and even before that, there was no access to Har Hazeisim. Okay, between 1948 and 1967, there was no access to Har Hazeisim because it was owned by Jordan. So we couldn't get it. It was at least administered by Jordan, so we couldn't get it. And before that as well, people were always afraid to go to Har Hazeisim. So Har Menuchos is very desirable even today. And who owns it? Who owns Har Tamir? Different Chevra's Kadisha, I believe. I don't know what ownership the state itself has. I cannot say what they provide, what they have to pay the state, but basically it is controlled by different Chevra's Kadisha.
Rabbi Zohn, these Chevra Kadishas that own them, basically, I guess, like you say, practice capitalism to the best. How much can we get per plot? Is that how it works?
Well, it's not a question of practicing capitalism. There is a very limited supply of graves. If, let's say, they have 100 graves or 500 graves, I don't know what they have. There may be absolutely none at this point.
There must be, Rabbi Zohn, there must be thousands and thousands of graves.
I will
everybody
tell you what they
in Eretz Yisroel gets buried.
In Eretz Yisroel right now,
there's 5 to 6 billion Jews in Eretz Yisroel. They're all going to die one day, right?
And as I said to you, they are getting buried in multiple depth graves and in above ground graves. That is what is happening to people that are sure right now, or they may be getting buried outside of these cemeteries. If you're familiar, Har Menuchos just is in the process of developing 22,000 graves. That is in an excavation that they've done below ground level. And they're burying these people in the walls of those graves, like Cohen, which is the way it was done years ago. And it's supposedly going to have 22,000 graves. I haven't seen it, but I know someone who did see it, and it's a fascinating project. What they're going to charge, it's a $50 million project to develop these graves. I imagine if they had all that land, they would not have been developing this. So I don't know what they have or they don't have. And
so let me do the math, Rabbi Zohn. It's 22,000 graves. It's going to cost $50 million. Let's give or take around $2,300 a grave. Those graves are going to sell for $25,000. Who keeps the difference between the $2,300 and the $25,000?
I have no idea, but I imagine the people who are developing it will be making a profit. And again, you're assuming that it's going to be $25,000. I don't know at that point if it'll be $25,000. I don't know. Again,
so
I
am
not
ask you,
in
Rabbi,
business, and I have no idea.
Okay.
To me, I ask the same questions. Yeah.
Rabbi, so do you think it's a job to say? You think it's unfair to say that people who are paying $25,000, and you say that's the cheapest one at Harabbonim, many are paying $35 or $40. That there is a big profit element. Do you know? Is it fair to say that there's a big profit element, and it's possible that people are being gouged?
It's possible. I don't know if in fact there are just a few graves available. Then I can understand that they can't supply to the first person who comes along, so prices go up. It's true with everything. That is a small profit. That is a small quantity. It's true with real estate. It's true with everything. But again, I don't know what it is fair business practice and what is above. I don't know. These are the facts. The fact is that everywhere in Eretz Yisroel, graves to people from Chutz La'aretz is extremely expensive to buy. What I believe is a much bigger problem is the fact that cemeteries across the country in the United States are selling graves at $6,000 or $8,000 a kever, and that is causing people to choose cremation at a very high rate. That's a whole different issue because you're not dealing about people who are frum, and to them a grave is not that important. So it's a very big problem, and that is because these cemeteries very often are owned by people who are looking to make a profit, big conglomerates, and in places where there is almost no grounds left, the prices are going up. What is happening in Yerushalayim, I cannot answer if it's fair or unfair because I'm really not privy to exactly what's happening. They are very high priced. That's the bottom line.
But in conclusion, based upon your numbers, it would cost around $8,000 plus $10,000 here in America, compared to around $40,000 bringing the body to Eretz Yisroel, bringing the nifta to Eretz Yisroel.
It could be as
It's
much
for
as that.
Har Tamir,
If it's Eretz for Har Tamir, it probably is that. For Eretz Achayim, you're talking about probably a total of $20,000 or even less. If it's done very recently, if there's no Levaya here, it could be much less. And these are decisions that people have to make based on what they, on what they feel is important to them. That's, these are very big decisions. But again,
Rabbi Zohn, thank you very much for your time.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you.
All the best. Bye-bye. So let me make a summary. Clearly, there are Rabbanim who hold that bring a burial in Eretz Yisroel is an Indian gadol. But there are many Rabbanim who are against it. A, for financial reasons. It's just simply, it's an Indian gadol, but it doesn't, like Rabbi Yoshev said, and we will post online all the letters. Rabbi Yoshev was asked, he said, if you can give tzedakah, you have a chi of mammon, you have chayvis, what do you do? He says, mitzvah saying the Torah. He says, burying Eretz Yisroel does not saying the Torah. We will post this online, either for financial reasons. Some say for hashkafic reasons, the Zayar, which was what the Sack Rebbe, the Divrei Yoel Zohn Levracha believed, which is why I think many Hasidim don't. And Rabbi Yankiv, about Rav Henkin for financial reasons too. He said, you're taking an almana, every mace has an almana or yasam or yisayim, and you're disempowering them. And then lastly, Rabbi Yankiv, a very powerful thing. He said, when you send the children, the parent away, you're cutting the Messiah somehow. You're damaging the Messiah. I can tell you, my father was buried in Eretz Yisroel, and I think it was a grievous mistake. Now, so many times I would like to go be mispal by my father's keva, but he's 6,000 miles away. It's just not possible to do. So in conclusion, if you do it, you have who to be saimach on, but as many of the Rabbanim said, it's something that it started in the last 50 years or so. There is no big body of halacha on it, and it's gotten really, really carried away. I look forward to speaking to you next week. This is David Lichtenstein, the Headlines Radio.